Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. I'm Julie Broadway, President at the American Horse Council, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Thank you to the leadership at the Arabian Horse Association and the board for inviting me to speak with you. Resilience. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that resilience is a superpower. A global pandemic, heightened racial tensions, political unrest, and economic volatility strained our organizations and our industry and really put us all to the test. Yet many organizations, such as yourselves, demonstrated that rapid change under extraordinary circumstances is possible. In a way, the pandemic was like being on a deserted island. As industry leaders, we were responsible for getting everyone off the island, but with little or no resources. We had to improve agility and reinvent ourselves to survive. We relied on experience to maintain hope, ensure open and transparent communications, instill trust, realign priorities, address equality and inclusion, harness staff creativity to explore new business opportunities, all the while embracing technology and strengthening resilience amongst all of our stakeholders in the industry. As we look ahead, we will need to muster all our resources to design the future of our organizations and our industries. This includes adapting our strategies and rethinking what it means to manage and conduct business in this new environment we find ourselves in. This starts with reflection and building on the lessons learned from the pandemic. If there was ever an opportunity for the American Horse Council to reaffirm why our organization exists and the value we bring to you, I've never known a better time. I'd like to take the next few minutes to give you a little context about our industry and what we've seen over the course of the last year. And I want to highlight some legislative and regulatory issues that we've been tackling, along with some new initiatives. And then I want to close by telling you some ways that we're here for you and ways we can help you as we move forward. In the 2017 National Equine Industry Economic Impact Study, we learned that 30.5% of US households contained a horse enthusiast, or 38 million households. That was a really impressive number, and we were delighted to learn that we had so much support from the general public. We were quite anxious during the course of the pandemic that we were going to see these numbers backslide like we did in the previous recession, but that did not turn out to be the case, I'm happy to say. We saw riding lessons increase, and we see waiting lines still for riding lessons, and we saw horse adoptions go up, and a number of other factors that we think really boded well for our industry. So these are just some quick statistics to remind you where we are: 7.2 million horses and 122 billion in total value added to the US economy, with over 1.74 million total employment impact. Nothing to sneeze at. So let's talk about what the American Horse Council does day in and day out. We advocate for the social, economic, and legislative interests of the US equine industry. We do that by focusing on federal legislative advocacy, federal regulatory issues, partnerships, education and leadership development, and industry initiatives. So who is the American Horse Council? Well, you are part of the American Horse Council, as are many, many others in the space. We have equine associations and organizations, we have small businesses, we have general horse owners or enthusiasts, we have our industry partners, and we have state horse councils. There are about 2 million horse owners in the US today, and through all of our organizations, we reach 1 million enthusiasts with our message. Here's how we're organized. The council itself is a 501c6. We have a 14-member board of directors, and we were formed in 1969 as a bipartisan advocacy organization that operates by consensus. That's a really important phrase, consensus, because when the industry is split on an issue, to avoid further divisiveness, the council speaks to all sides of the subject, but we remain neutral on that matter. We also have a 501c, that's our foundation, which supports charitable, scientific, and educational projects. And we have a political action committee, or a PAC, which is called COLT, the Committee on Legislation and Taxation. We have 5 standing committees, which you see here on this slide. We have a coalition of state horse councils, which is made up of the 25 current state horse councils across the country. And then we have a privately funded marketing alliance. Now, it's important to note that the Arabian Horse Association was one of the founding members of the American Horse Council, and you've remained active for a number of years, and you serve on a number of these committees. Here's who we are day in and day out. I've already introduced myself. I have Cliff Williamson, who's my Director of Health and Regulatory Affairs. We have a new Government Affairs Liaison. Mark Rizzo just joined us recently. We have our Director of the United Horse Coalition, which is our initiative to help horses and horse owners that find themselves in unusual circumstances and need some assistance, and that's Ashley Harkins. We have a Program Manager for our Equine Welfare Data Collective, which is a research project we're doing about horses that are in rescues and sanctuaries across the country. That's Emily Stearns. We have a part-time membership and communications person that we're trying to fill right now. We traditionally have had a program manager for our marketing alliance, but that's on hiatus at this point. At any given time, we have 3 to 7 undergrad or graduate students who are doing internships with us, focusing on special projects. To keep our costs low, all those other overhead services that are needed for any business, we outsource, such as our reception and our accounting and auditing and all those other things you see listed here. So let's get to the meat of this. What have we been working on the past year for federal legislative work? So, of course, COVID relief. We have been working very closely with all the equine associations and small businesses in our space to help them navigate through PPP or Small Business Administration loans or other recovery resources they might need. We have been focusing on federal tax policy, especially estate tax and horse depreciation. Foreign workers are important to our industry, so labor policy and guest worker visas are a priority for us. We had a great success a few years ago with the Great American Outdoors Act. We're working on the SOAR Act now, which is a complementary piece, which ensures that we have good maintenance on trails in our park systems so we can get out there and ride. We have had very strong support for equine assisted services and the whole Veterans Act with some funding through the VA for veterans to receive treatment through equine assisted services. We follow and work hard on the Horse Protection Act and the Prevent All Soaring Tactics Act, which has been reintroduced, and we are working with champions on that act right now to see if we can move that along. We are neutral on the Safeguard American Food Exports Act and on the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. And lastly, we follow sports betting because that's a piece of our industry too. On the regulatory side, we work with USDA frequently on a number of issues. Some of those include disease mitigation and import-export regulations. We also work with them on rule changes for things like re-entry of competition horses. A couple of years ago, we have continued to work with the Department of Transportation on electronic logging devices and commercial driver's license requirements for people in the horse industry. Most recently, we've been working with the Environmental Protection Agency on a rule change that they have proposed for pyrethrin, which is used in fly sprays. We've submitted comments and worked closely with them, and we are confident that we're going to see some things work in our favor in that area. We have been asked to get involved with environmental regulations in large-scale equine facilities that are being threatened by CAFO rules. CAFO stands for Consolidated Animal Feed Operations, not originally intended for equine facilities, but for livestock facilities, but we're seeing this happen in a few states. So we've been working again with USDA and EPA on that. During the pandemic, we saw an outpouring of people wanting to get outside and use trail systems and multi-use trails, especially for hikers and bikers and all kinds of folks. And e-bike declassification came up at the Department of Interior. Now, e-bikes are electronic bikes that can go up to almost 30 miles an hour. And if you can just imagine yourself on trail riding your horse pleasantly along, and suddenly a bicycle appears at 30 miles an hour, that's going to be a little bit of a safety hazard. So we've been working really closely with DOI on that. And last, I mentioned earlier, trails maintenance. The Great American Outdoors Act was implemented, and now we're into the phase of prioritizing trails that need to be repaired. So because we operate by consensus, we are considered a neutral third party on matters in our industry. Thus, we are often asked by industry leaders to spearhead and oversee initiatives that would benefit the entire industry. And here's just a quick list. Of course, the Equine Disease Communication Center. I mentioned already the United Horse Coalition and our Equine Welfare Data Collective. We also set up a universal equine microchip lookup tool called horselookup.org. This year, we implemented a youth engagement task force, which has been really active, trying to look at ways that we can increase youth engagement. And we established a diversity, equality, and inclusion task force, which is a collective industry effort to increase DEI in our space. We just recently completed an Equine Research Ecosystem Summit, which is also an effort to increase and promote research in our industry. We are gearing ourselves up for the 2023 Economic Impact Study. We'll begin to get mobilized in 2022 and start fundraising for that. We also have a number of ad hoc committees. We have one with the USDA on import and export. Our Recreation Trails and Land Use Committee is working very closely with Backcountry Horsemen of America, Equine Land Conservation Resource, and our American Endurance Riding on the lack of available horse campsites in Forest Service and Park Service areas. We saw a lot of campers during the pandemic. People wanted to get outside and camp, and they have started to take advantage of campsites that are earmarked for livestock users. So we've been working really closely on that. The Health and Regulatory Committee has been working on a consumer warning over concerns about ransom and bailout things that have been going around on social media. We have also been working very closely with USDA on concerns they have about equine infection anemia and equine paraplasmosis transmission, which is occurring predominantly at match races or unsanctioned racing events. So we're doing a little due diligence there. And last, we have a state expert team. These are state expert policies that have the potential to spread across the states. So we've been really drilling down a little bit on some of those. I'd like to take just a minute to tell you some things that you could benefit from. While I have partnerships on the left, those are coalitions that we work with day in and day out. I want to call your attention to the things that are on the right side of this slide. This is our education and leadership. We offer quarterly educational webinars on a variety of subjects. We just did one on climate change and green horse facilities. We have one coming up that's on the Compton Cowboys, which should be wonderful. We have our annual conference, and we have our fly-ins, which are either in October or for youth in August. And we have our Equine Industry CEO Forum, which I'm going to speak a little bit more about in a second. I already mentioned our student internship opportunities, but we publish a number of different pieces of literature. We have a monthly newsletter. We have our Washington Updates, which is about time-sensitive legislation. And we have grassroots lobbying guidelines and our call to action, a tax handbook and a tax bulletin we put out, and of course, the economic impact study. So as I mentioned, one of the things we really want to do is help you help yourself. So that's where our Equine CEO Forum comes into play. These are all the equine CEOs and executive directors across the country. We meet periodically to talk about issues that we're all tackling. I've put up a few here just to give you a flavor, but my point here is that there are resources available that we offer to help organizations navigate unexpected things that they encounter. We have some topics here like advancing business innovation and pursuing economic stimulus. And I already talked about DEI, but we also have had some wonderful speakers on how to do virtual events, what are the best practices, what to do about pandemic risk insurance. Should you get it or shouldn't you? telecommuting best practices as we went into the pandemic. Almost all of us sent our employees to work from home, and there's some challenges there. We've heard a great presentation about prevention and detection for fraud. And most recently, we've been talking about prevention and mitigation from cybersecurity, because that became a real threat, even more so during the pandemic. So with that, what I'd like to close with is I'd really like to challenge you to explore opportunities to leverage untapped potential to meet the changing needs of your stakeholders. And I'd like to offer you the opportunity to reach out to me or any on my staff to provide you with additional resources or address any questions you might have about any of the materials that I've presented here, or just questions you have in general. Thank you again for your time and your attention. It's been a pleasure being with you, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in 2022.